Simon & Schuster Audio presents Star Trek Deep Space Nine, Warped by K.W. Jeter, read by Rene Auberjonois.
A hand darted into the water, through the ribbons of green weeds, streaming in the current, into the darkness between the stones, smooth as black pearls. A fist came back up, with flashes of silver wriggling from either side, a clear rivulet dripping from the elbow. Jake Sisko regarded the fish in the other boy's grasp. He was filled with both admiration and a stomach-knotting unease at the other's lightning quickness. Too fast, he thought. That's not right. The two boys hunkered knees to chest on the largest rock in the middle of the creek. The other boy thrust the captured fish in front of Jake's face. Look! Look at it! The creature's round eyes were emblems of unreasoning panic, the pink-rimmed gills fluttering wide in the strangling air. Its mouth made an idiot O as the boy's thumb traced the seam of its belly. Jake wanted to tell the other boy to let the fish go, to throw it back into the water, but he was afraid to. He didn't even know the other boy's name, but then he didn't need to. Oh, we've done a fish before. They're nothing special. The other boy weighed the creature's fate and tossed it away. He leaned over the side of the rock, shading his eyes to hunt for something better. Jake felt the squeeze around his heart relax. In the distance, on the creek's other side, the grass's feathery tops parted and settled together again as a hidden shape moved below them. He knew it was the big orange tabby with battered ears that lived on the mice from the barn beyond the hill. Or the barn that used to be over there. It had gradually faded away, as though pushed from existence by this little world's new commanding presence. Everything here had changed, or was about to. Jake's companion leaned closer to the water. I saw something, down there. The boy's hand brushed through the green weeds. He stretched out, chest against the rock, so he could reach all the way down. Then, sitting back on his haunches, the boy held up the prize. For a moment, Jake thought the wetly shining thing was just a rock. Then he saw the stubby, clawed legs poking out from the corners. It was a turtle. The boy reached into the pocket of his jeans and fetched out the little folding knife. This'll be fun, Jake. You know it will. Jake squeezed his eyes shut. It didn't do any good to keep whispering to himself that nothing here was real. The boy poked at the side of the shell with the knife point, as though trying to find a hidden latch. He held the knife out to Jake. You want to? Jake shook his head. I'll just watch this time. While the boy focused his attention back on the struggling turtle, Jake was remembering when he had first become aware of the other boy's presence here. He hadn't even seen him, but had found his handiwork. In the woods, farther down the creek, in the damp-smelling shadows, he had found a space of bare earth, scraped out of the tangled roots and dead leaves, empty except for something that lay beneath a swarm of flies, a cat, or what had been one. He had stepped back from it in disgust and had almost tripped over one of the cords that looped around the trunks of the nearest trees and pulled the dead thing into a spread-eagled X on the ground. Since then he had seen more things, and never without feeling sick in his gut afterwards. He closed his eyes when he heard a tiny sound, the whisper the knife made when it cut through something soft and yielding. Not for the first time, he wished everything around him was a dream, a real dream, the kind from which he could wake when it got too scary. A section of bulkhead, the curved wall between the gridded floor and the overhead light panels, rippled like flowing water for a moment, then peeled away and recoalesced into the form of Deep Space Nine's Chief of Security. Odo looked around the angle of the nearest corner. There was no sign of the individual he had been tracking, Armand Wyos, an itinerant freight handler who had been catching occasional pickup work in the station's main docking pylon. Odo turned and retrieved a small plastoid box with a pair of dangling probe wires. He had hidden it there before flowing into his own molecule-thick concealment over the bulkhead segment. The device extracted access codes and corresponding names from the databanks of the station's holosuites. Wyos had spent an inordinate amount of time here, immersed in the artificial worlds of the holosuites that had been installed along this remote passageway several levels away from the main action of the promenade. This habit alone served as an identifying quirk for Wyos. Why this need for privacy? A thug like Armand Wyos wouldn't care what other people thought of his recreational activities. That Wyos also had enough rudimentary intelligence left to elude a tracker made Odo feel uneasy. Armand Wyos was somewhere else aboard the station. The sooner the suspect was located, the better. There were 3 corpses lying in the station's morgue. Each of them had been ripped open from throat to bipedal lower extremities by a honed pry blade. The pry blade was a folding tool that the freight handlers on the loading docks used to slice through heavy cables and lever apart stuck container seals. 2 of the corpses had been the frenzied product of one of Wyos's co-workers who had slit his own throat before Odo could apprehend him. The third and latest murder had been committed more discreetly, with no clue left behind. No clue other than the rousing of Odo's sharper instincts every time he had seen Wyos skulking through the station's corridors. Something in the eyes, or rather behind them, like a worm uncoiling around the pit of a small fruit. That, plus the rather more concrete datum of Wyos's pry blade being missing from his locker. At the moment, the holosuite closest to Odo was occupied. Odo inserted the probe wires beneath the edge of the door's control panel to obtain the exact credit access code. On the device's small readout panel, the numbers shifted, held for a moment, then changed to letters. One by one, they spelled out the name Sisko, followed by the initial J, the access code for the station commander's son, Jake. Odo switched off the device and stowed it in his uniform pocket. A wordless concern nagged at him, but there was no time to puzzle over it now. He turned and strode quickly toward the corridor's hub. When he reached the crowded promenade, Odo spotted Armand Wyos. Odo pulled himself back into the shadow of a structural pillar to keep from being sighted in turn by his target. Across the promenade, the sweating, heavy-jawed face of Armand Wyos was still visible. Even from this far away, Odo could pick up the murderous rage given off by the man. When Wyos's simmering gaze swung away, Odo moved in closer. Suddenly, the flash of the metal pry blade stabbed Odo's vision. The crowd surged back from Wyos, away from the naked blade. Odo wedged himself through the humanoid wall. The turbolift doors had opened a few meters away from Wyos. Odo realized that was what Wyos was waiting for. 2 people had emerged from the turbolift, Major Kira and Commander Sisko. They were talking to each other, not perceiving the outbreak of chaos their entrance had caused until it was too late. Odo launched himself over the last ring of bodies as Commander Sisko spotted the arc of descending metal and raised his forearm to ward off the blurring stroke aimed at him. Major Kira dropped into a crouch and propelled both herself and Commander Sisko out of the blade's path. Before Odo could do anything to assist, it was over. Sisko rolled against Wyos's legs with enough force to stagger him against the wall. The pry blade flew out of Wyos's grasp and skittered across the promenade deck. Sisko hit Wyos with an elbow check to the abdomen, and Wyos dropped to his knees. Odo pulled Wyos' arm back and snapped a pair of restraints onto his wrists.
I've got him. Are you all right, Commander?
Sisko brushed down the front of his uniform and nodded.
A little adrenaline overdose, Constable, but nothing serious. How about you, Major?
Don't worry about me. Who the hell is this creep anyway, Odo?
The suspect's identity has already been established. His motives remain the subject of an ongoing investigation.
Sisko peered into Wyos' slack-jawed face.
Constable, is this connected to the, incidents you spoke to me about previously? I'm afraid that's likely to be the case, Commander. I see. We'll need to discuss this matter further. Have a complete report ready for me by the end of the shift.
Odo gave a quick nod in acknowledgement and barked at the circle of gawking faces.
There's nothing to see here. Move along.
A path opened through the crowd, and Odo shoved the suspect toward the security station at the other end of the promenade. Sisko and Kira continued to their destination, Quark's establishment. Kira had just returned from her home planet Bajor, and Sisko wanted a full briefing about the political developments there. Quark brought 2 mugs of synthale to their booth, compliments of the house. Sisko activated the booth's privacy shield, and the murmur of voices from outside was cut to a dead silence. Kira took a careful sip, then pushed the mug away.
Commander, the situation on Bajor is much worse than we had thought it would be.
Sisko nodded slowly.
The severity front? Who else? It looks like we severely underestimated the strength of anti-Federation sentiment on Bajor.
The commander set down his half-empty mug.
So, what do you think, Major? What would you estimate the chances for the severity front?
Kira shook her head.
I don't know. Since the Kai's absence from Bajor, the splinter groups and factions opposed to membership in the Federation have managed to unite their efforts behind the Front's single banner. The Front's chances are good. Real good. How any of your people can oppose a process that will bring their world such benefit... Commander, we've gone over this before. The simple truth is that those supposed benefits just haven't shown up yet, have they? So far, the Federation hasn't delivered. These things take time, Major, but there will be a tremendous expenditure of financial and technical resources upon this sector. For God's sake, Commander, the Cardassians told us as much while they were stripping every leaf and speck of minerals from the planet. We don't have time for patience. We've suffered enough.
Sisko drew himself up to full height.
If that's the case, then despite our earlier assessment, your world may be a long way from readiness for Federation membership and its benefits. The Federation Council has concerns other than the welfare of Bajor and its people.
Kira had heard the lecture from him before.
Commander, if Bajor is so far down the list of the Federation's priorities, then you'd better be prepared for Bajor to take a good hard look at what it gets out of dealing with the Federation. And is that what you want, Major? For Bajor to go its own way?
She again felt the tug, the division between the oldest loyalty of her heart and the new one she had assumed. She shook her head.
No, I wouldn't be here at Deep Space Nine if that was what I wanted.
Sisko pushed back his chair and rose to leave.
Very well. I'll need your complete report on the political situation on Bajor, and I mean absolutely complete. Names, alliances, antagonisms, influences that we can bring to bear on different factions. Everything, Major.
Kira watched as the commander threaded his way among the crowded tables, heading for the bar's exit. She lifted the mug and took a sip, the taste sharply bitter on her tongue. Odo entered Sisko's office and the commander waved him to a chair. Sisko turned toward the computer panel on the desk. The last screen full of Odo's report still showed.
Let's get down to business, Constable. This is a very distressing situation that's developed.
Odo's eyes were two hotly glaring coals.
It's more than that, Commander. It's intolerable. Constable, this Armand Wyos individual you have in custody, I take it he would have been our third perpetrator? That is, if he had managed to land the blow he had aimed at myself and Major Kira? Yes, Commander.
Sisko began scrolling through the text of Odo's report.
Since the other two perpetrators ended their rampages by committing suicide, that would make our Wyos an important subject of investigation. He is the only one we've managed to apprehend alive. Are there any traceable connections between him and the others?
Odo shrugged.
Nothing definitive. I'm still sifting through the details. Wyos is not an unknown quantity. We can track his employment history through nearly 2 decades. He's just a run-of-the-mill itinerant laborer of marginal intelligence and skills. There are millions of them wandering between planets. And you believe you can connect this extremely ordinary individual with our little group of dead murderers? Commander, he did take a swing at your head with an open pry blade, and some of Wyos's bizarre ramblings are similar to recordings made by the murderers and ex post facto accounts of their crimes. In all cases, there are common elements of an absorbing fantasy construct in which the individuals seem to be trapped in a not particularly pleasant world. Well, Constable, as long as we have this material from the murderers, and presumably more material forthcoming from our attempted murderer, we should put it through as much analysis as possible. I quite agree, Commander. That's why I've asked Lieutenant Dax to begin a separate investigation. Dr. Bashir will assist her. I've turned copies of all my records pertaining to this case over to her and given her complete access to the prisoner, Armand Wyos. She indicated that she understood the urgency attached to this matter and has already started work on it. Constable, give this matter your highest priority. Notify me at once of any new developments. Of course, Commander.
As soon as Odo had left the office, Sisko sent the report back to the computer's confidential archives. For once, Odo's dark musings seemed accurate. His report on the murders had gone into distressing levels of detail. Science Officer Jadzia Dax already was deep into her research. Not all the things she had begun monitoring were taking place inside Armand Wyos's skull. There were others. Data from the various sensors arrayed in the empty, starlit space between DS9. Deviations in readings that were so small as to be almost imperceptible. Just enough to form not a pattern, but the barest suggestion of one, the outline of a shape not yet visible to her. Until she knew what they meant, it was best to keep the observations to herself. She turned her attention to the computer screen. There, the smaller universe of Armand Wyos was being carefully pried apart. Rows of numbers bounced between a narrow range of values, giving her a real-time monitoring of his physiological processes. Something was going on inside the subject's visual information process. Dax thought, he's seeing things. But what? Mere dreams, even nightmares, didn't produce such neuroanatomical storms. She scanned past the other numbers, hormone levels whipsawed between states of panic and anger. With another command, she switched the screen to a view from the overhead camera in the subject's secured isolation chamber. Dax observed the clenching of the jaw, the straining neck tendons, the feverish sweat upon the brow. Computer, give me audible on this subject.
No, I can't. No, stop, I can't. But
The voice was scarcely human, a howl of anguish from the darkest, unexplored caverns of the mind.
No, no, no. Please.
All right, computer, that's enough. Computer, I want all material from this subject indexed against the recordings logged on by the Chief of Security. Reference tag, Epidemic. Give me a breakdown on all distinctive word patterns and imagery that cross-link between the recordings. Dax knew there was nothing to do now but wait. Odo continued his own investigations. He cornered Chief O'Brien on the engineering deck and dragooned him along on a search of one of DS9's remoter and less frequented corridors. It held a row of new holosuites that had recently been shipped on board the station. These were the holosuites Wyos had favored. Odo hadn't been able to conjecture why anyone would travel all this way to use them when there were better-maintained ones on the promenade. O'Brien knew that the holosuites had been checked out prior to activation, but after he had examined the internal components of one of the holosuites, O'Brien had emerged with a rectangular black box in his hands, proof that someone had tampered with the mechanism. Odo and O'Brien immediately took the black box to Dax for analysis. Shortly after, she summoned Sisko to her laboratory. As he rubbed his thumb across the enameled surface of the box's casing, Dax filled him in on her investigation. She pointed to the workbench along the laboratory's other side. "The unit's interior components are over there."
You've completed your analysis on them?
"For the most part. I'm afraid, Benjamin, that we'll have a difficult time determining the source of these devices. Whoever built them didn't leave a lot of clues inside." Sisko picked up one of the pieces, a mute crystalline cylinder.
What about its function? Its effect on these altered holosuites?
"It's not good news, Benjamin. There are some very serious consequences to what I've found here."
Related to the epidemic of murders?
She nodded. "Basically, the situation with the holosuites in the indicated sector is as Odo suspected. They've all been tampered with. An operations crew is currently removing the other modules identical to this one. The technology that's employed in these modules is a very powerful and illicit sensory input technology that's usually referred to as CI, cortical induction. It's not anything new, but CI technology was suppressed by the Federation authorities." Her hand moved slowly above the bench, as though her fingertips could read the message encoded in the carefully separated pieces. "You know how an unmodified holosuite works, Benjamin. Essentially, it creates an illusory experience by presenting sensory data to the user's normal percept system, including tactile sensations by means of low-level tractor beams or by replicating objects that can actually be touched and held. What makes the CI technology so powerful is that it bypasses the sense organs entirely. It operates by inducing the desired current flow and synaptic discharges in the neurofibers of the user's brain. The resulting experience is much more commanding in the intensity of the illusion created. If undergone often enough, it can begin to override the user's perception of reality itself. The consequences, as we've seen, can be severe."
Dax, are you quite sure that there's a definite connection between these CI modules and the outbreak of murders on board DS9?
"My investigation into the matter is still at a preliminary stage, Benjamin. A great deal will be determined by the correlation I find between the CI programming and the analysis of what I've been recording from the subject Armand Wyos."
Very well, Dax. Keep me apprised immediately of any new developments.
His gaze moved again across the sparkling and mute pieces laid out on the bench's surface. Then he turned away and strode out the laboratory door. Major Kira caught up with Sisko as he headed for the ops deck. "Commander, I've received some transmissions from our contacts on Bajor updating the political situation. There's been some developments just in the time that I've been back here at the station."
"Oh, Major? And what are they?"
"Unfortunately, Commander, it's all in line with what I've previously reported. The Severity Front has made some significant advances. They've acquired a highly effective spokesman, a General Auer." Sisko's brow furrowed in concentration.
Who is he?
Kira shrugged. A hero of the Bajoran resistance. That's where the military title comes from, at least. Since the Cardassian occupation ended, though, he's been a constant thorn in the side of the provisional government. My own assessment would be that he can shift his positions to whatever will bring him the most power, so he can be pretty dangerous. Major, I have yet to meet a Bajoran that I wouldn't consider dangerous. Yourself included, of course. Sisko rubbed the corner of his brow, as if pushing back his accumulating concerns. Keep me posted, Major. If anything happens with this General Auer, we'll make containing the effects a top priority. He walked away from her, knowing full well that there was more that she had wanted to tell him, and more that needed taking care of. There was always more. Odo was waiting in Sisko's office. How's the investigation going, Constable?
We've made considerable progress, Commander. I've been able to extract a record from each of the holosuites that has been tampered with, establishing all of the recent users. My initial suspicions were borne out. All of the murderers and Armand Wyas were frequent users of the altered holosuites.
Fine, Constable. Keep up the good work, and get back to me if you uncover anything new. Sisko switched on his computer panel. He looked up a few seconds later, realizing that Odo was still sitting across the desk from him. He asked, "Is there something else, Constable?"
Yes. There was something else I wanted to bring to your attention. It's a personal matter, I think, to do with you.
Then I'm afraid I don't have time for it. Right now, I don't have a personal life.
I believe it's important, Commander.
Is it really that urgent?
I think it is. It's about your son, Jake. As I've said, I've extracted the list of frequent users of the altered holosuites, and Jake is one of them.
Are you sure? Odo nodded.
I had O'Brien check out the device he constructed for me that reads out the access codes. The data I've obtained is reliable. Your son's use of the altered holosuites appears to still be in a preliminary stage. The pattern we've seen of increasingly frequent visits has only just started to accelerate in his case. There's time.
Constable, were all of those CI modules removed from the holosuites in question?
Actually, they weren't, Commander. We left one module online, with a security monitor attached in case we needed to investigate its effects in situ, as it were.
Thank you, Constable. That's all. As commander of the station, Sisko had no problem in entering the restricted sector with a simple computer override and finding the one holosuite that had been left functional. He peeled away Odo's security seal and dropped it on the floor beside him. He set the holosuite's programming for what he knew was one of his son's favorites. With a press of his finger, the door slid open, and he stepped inside to a sunlit world. The doorway closed behind him, completing the holosuite's illusion. A warm summer wind moved across a field of yellow grasses. The barely perceptible scent of cool, running water came from beyond the dense stand of trees some distance away. He had been here before, with Jake. In the wood's darkness, he found the first wrong thing. The whitening bones of a cat, the dry fragments spread obscenely apart by coarse twine looped around the nearest tree trunks. The cat's skull bared its teeth in a silent howl. He walked on back into the sunlight to the creek's edge. Water purled against the rocks. Less than a meter away, he found more death. The body of a man sprawled face down, fingertips clawing into the muddy bank. Kneeling down, Sisko turned the body over and found himself gazing at his own face, sightless eyes fixed upon the sun. Somebody was watching him. He could feel it. He looked up and saw a man with arms folded across his chest, eyes dark as holes into night. A mocking smile twisted one side of his narrow face. Sisko let the corpse with his face slip from his grasp. "Who are you?"
Don't you know? I'm Makog. I live here.
Sisko's rage burst like a red flower in his vision, blinding him as he leaped forward, hands outstretched for the throat of the image that vanished. His fingers scraped hard into the wet earth and rounded stones at the creek's edge. Sisko drew back onto his haunches. The illusion of water mingled with his own blood, fell into the stream, and was born from his sight. From an arched open window of the temple of Kaiopaka, Kira could see the runabout that had brought her home once more. The rough stone of the wall, set into place centuries ago and ornamented with the carved tracery of a long-dead artisan, contrasted with the smoothly functional lines of the craft. One of the temple's acolytes moved up beside Kira. "We did not expect to see you again so soon after your last visit. The station did not notify us of your coming." "They don't know I'm here. I didn't tell anyone at Deep Space Nine where I was going. I didn't submit a flight plan. I just went and came here. I'm not sure why." The sun's edge had risen over the horizon, enough to bring a smoke-like mist from the damp fields. The acolyte waited in silence until Kira spoke again. "There's some crisis going on aboard the station. Right now, Commander Sisko's attention is entirely taken up with that, and frankly, if he were burnt out on dealing with every little twist and turn in Bajoran politics, I wouldn't blame him." "So you decided to take care of this latest problem with the severity front all by yourself?" "I suppose it's too important to let it slide, and then just hope that we can pick up the pieces later. There might not be a later, if our and the other front leaders get their way as far as Bajoran involvement with the Federation." The acolyte raised an eyebrow. "And you feel that by yourself you can change all that?" "There was one person who kept it from happening before." "Yes, but you're not Kaiopaka." Kira sighed. "Don't think I'm not painfully aware of that." A smile from the acolyte. "Perhaps if you persist in this endeavor you will learn much. I doubt if even the Kai was born with all the virtues she possessed before she answered the call of the prophets." Kira stepped back from the arched window. As much as the temple's quiet had returned a measure of strength to her soul, she knew that the time to leave had come. There were people in the capital whom she needed to see, words to be spoken, and, with any luck, negotiations to be made. As she made her way toward the twisting stone steps, the other woman called to her. "You go with our hopes, and the blessing of one that is no longer with us." Commander Sisko faced Dr. Bashir in one of the infirmary's small consulting rooms. Sisko knew that the doctor would err on the side of kindness. That was why he ordered the station's chief medical officer to tell the truth, no matter what pain and guilt was involved. The doctor smiled. "It actually looks pretty good. I ran a complete battery of tests on Jake. Everything from real-time neural pathway charting and catecholamine receptor indices to old-fashioned Rorschach ink blots. And I found a healthy young boy, physically and mentally. There's no sign of either the synaptic degeneration or obsessive thought patterning that we've seen with Armand Wyos and the others." Sisko heard his own voice as though it were coming from someone else. "You've forgotten something, Doctor. I've seen evidence of my son's condition that doesn't show up in all your scannings and tests. In that holosuite, I saw my own death. I saw my murdered corpse lying on the ground." "An illusion, Commander?" Anger flared inside Sisko. "An illusion that couldn't exist at all unless it reflected something true, something in Jake. The CI module found something inside my son, some part of him that wanted his father dead, and it granted him that wish. Commander,
when you were a child, when you were Jake's age, did you ever wish your own father dead, even just in a little flash of anger?
Sisko turned a fierce glare toward Bashir.
Many times, Doctor, every child does. Exactly. And what kept you from ever trying to actually kill your father? Only that I knew, once I got over being stupid and angry, that I loved him very much. Just as most children do, Commander. They conquer the murderer inside themselves, as you and I did, as we all did. The CI module appears to find the weakest part of someone's personality, remove it and isolate it, and nourish it in the absence of all the rest of what a thinking and feeling person can be. It takes that small killer that's inside all of us and lets it run wild. That thing that this McHogue took from inside your son's mind, that McHogue changed into something that was no longer your son, that was your murderer.
Sisko managed a faint smile.
Very well, Doctor. In medical matters, at least, I yield to your greater expertise. I suppose that right now there's a lot I need to talk to Jake about. And what I need to think about is what Jake would want me to do. Whether we should leave DS9.
Bashir nodded.
He's waiting for you in the examining room.
As Sisko opened the door, his son looked up at him and studied him warily.
Hello, Jake. Dad, I thought you'd be angry.
Sisko sat down beside his son.
Not at you, Jake. Only at myself.
Somewhere beyond, the affairs of the station and the surrounding worlds clamored for Sisko's attention, but he ignored them as he talked with Jake. Later, as they walked through the station toward their living quarters, they passed by the entrance to the promenade. Through it, Jake caught sight of one of Quark's holosuites, still presumably safe and uninfected by the CI modules. He looked up at his father.
I don't want to go in there again. Ever.
Sisko steered his son toward the turbolift.
Not even for a game of baseball?
Jake's face clouded, his brow creased with deliberation.
I'll have to think about that.
Sisko started out of his living quarters, moving in the hurried manner that had come to characterize him in the last several high-pressure shifts. But he stopped short. Odo was waiting in the corridor.
Commander, I take it that your son is all right. Dr. Bashir indicated as much to me. However, there are some other things that should be brought to your attention. Some more recent developments. Such as, Constable? Chief O'Brien has determined that more holosuites, virtually all of the new units, have been altered with the illicit CI modules. It seems as if our mysterious McHogue was somehow able to bring a large quantity of the modules on board in a way that can't be traced through the pylon's loading docks.
Sisko nodded as he mulled over the data.
And I suppose there's still no indication of how this McHogue himself might have gotten into DS9, or if he's still here? You mean physically, rather than as an apparition in one of the altered holosuites? At this point, there's no way of determining that. The station is riddled with hiding places. In other words, Constable, it's up to our mysterious visitor as to whether he shows himself to us or not. I'm afraid so, Commander. But surveillance has been increased in all the sectors where the CI modules have been found in the holosuites, on the off chance that McHogue might return to those areas.
The turbolift opened beside them, and Sisko stepped into it.
Let me know if anything further develops. There's something else I need to discuss with you, Commander.
Odo hesitated a moment.
Major Kira left in one of the station's runabouts without filing a flight plan. Her whereabouts have been determined. So where is she? At the moment, she's in transit, returning from Bajor.
Sisko's shoulders lifted in a shrug.
I expect Major Kira had her reasons. She's made similar trips before. Well, this may be a little different. While you were occupied with these concerns regarding your son, Ops received an official subspace communication from the Bajoran capital. There's been a successful coup d'etat against the provisional government. The Severity Front, led by General Auer, has taken complete control of the planet.
Sisko's eyes widened.
You must be joking, Constable. I'm not known for my humorous abilities.
Sisko gave a weary sigh.
The way things were going, I suppose this was inevitable. We'll just have to deal with it then, at least until the Bajoran people toss this lot out. That may not happen for a while, Commander. I've been in touch with my own informants on Bajor. It seems that the new government has every sign of enjoying wide popular support. My informants were also able to fill me in on Major Kira's activities while she was planetside. It seems that she had private meetings with various members of the Severalty Front, including General Auer, immediately before the coup.
The commander's expression grew hard.
Indeed. Are you making an accusation against Major Kira? Of course not. I'm merely providing information which I believe you should have. Very well, Constable. Carry on with your other investigations.
Sisko pressed a button and the turbolift doors slid shut. As the turbolift moved through the station, he closed his eyes, gathering his strength. The weight upon his shoulders had been great enough already, and now this information about Major Kira's activities on the surface of Bajor had come to light. What if Kira had changed her mind, re-evaluated what she thought Bajor's future should be? Not the Federation, but something else, something that General Auer and the rest of the Severalty Front were busy conjuring up. The turbolift came to a halt, its destination reached. Eyes still closed, Sisko rubbed the ache at the corner of his brow. Kira hadn't even arrived back at the station yet. He'd have to sort all this out with her soon enough. In the meantime, though, even with that and the other problems stacking up, there was something else he needed to take care of first. Some unfinished business between himself and someone who had slipped out of his hands like the shadows cast by another world's warming sun. The door of the holosuite, the one that had been left with the CI module still in place, slid open at his touch upon the control panel. Once more, the sun of an eternal summer day leaked through the fingers of the hand with which he shielded his eyes. His brow was dotted with sweat when he reached the cooling shade. Beneath the interlaced branches, the small white bones of the dead cat were still scattered about. The hallucination of a dead cat, he had to remind himself. He turned slowly. Through the shifting screen of leaves, Sisko could feel the sun watching him with an unblinking gaze. Inside, everything here, the bright daylight, the breeze that smelled of dust and pollen, the sound of water rippling nearby, it had all been inside Jake's head too, as well as the small white bones and the broken things that leaked red into the dust. Sisko could just make out the figure sitting on the broad, flat rock near the stream. A boy. He felt his heart stumble in his chest as the boy turned and looked at him. The face was Jake's. Sisko moved nearer, stood a few meters away from the image. "Who are you?" A smile twisted one side of the image's face. "Don't you know? I'm your son, Jake." "No, you're not. You're nothing. A hallucination. A fiber being tugged at in my brain. That's all." Another voice, deeper and harder, came from the image's mouth. "Oh, you want to discuss metaphysics, do you? Or is it neurophysiology? It doesn't matter. In that other world, your percept system detects a certain pattern of light and shadow sounds at your ear, and you immediately say, 'Hello, Jake, my darling boy,' don't you?" The image tilted its head, studying him from another angle. "The same processes happen here. Sensory throughput and pattern recognition, all adding up to the same thing. And you reject it." The voice became that of a young boy again. "You're breaking my heart, Dad. I feel like an orphan." A wave of anger rose inside Sisko. "This is a waste of time. I came here to speak to McHogue, but you're just an illusion." Jake's image nodded. "Who was it who said that reality is that which, when you stop believing in it, it still exists?" Sisko made no reply. There was no point. The image shot him a murderous glance. All right, I'm going. Sisko looked over his shoulder and saw McHogue. He stood at the edge of the holosuite's glade, his black garb blending into the tree's shade. I'll assume, McHogue, that you're real, in some way at least. McHogue's narrow face was touched by a mocking smile. Well, that's good of you, Commander. I'd hate to think that you believed you were talking to yourself. Sisko studied the figure standing before him. I could pull the plug on you in 10 seconds. McHogue nodded in approval. That's a good attitude to maintain, Commander. True friendship is really only possible between equals, don't you think? Though, actually, getting rid of the holosuites wouldn't affect me much or my plans. It's far too late for that. Surely you don't believe that this is the only place I exist? Whereas the boy you just met, that rather interesting variation on your own son, Jake, I'm pretty sure he doesn't exist anywhere else. He was born here, so to speak. The cortical induction technology isn't just a one-way street. It observes and learns from everyone that comes into it. It creates what you might call echoes of the various users of the modified holosuites. There's even an echo of me here, as a boy, just about your own son's age. He's quite a rascal. Sisko looked across the expanse of yellow grasses, then back to McHogue. So you've already started to populate your little self-contained world. McHogue's eyes turned steely. Commander, I didn't come here to turn myself into the tin god of a private universe. I have no use for these fantasies except as a means of achieving my ambition in your world, and all the ones beyond it. But time's a-wasting. I must be on my way. Good talking to you. But now I have to pull the plug on you. The smiling figure disappeared. A moment later, so did the trees that had been behind him. Sisko turned, watching the yellow grass fade away, the creek dwindling to a mist. The distant hills became steel walls studded with the holosuite's optic transmitters. The sun was the last of all. Major Kira went to Commander Sisko's office on Ops straight from docking her runabout. The expression on Sisko's face was as ominous as banks of storm clouds gathering at the horizon. Have a seat, Major. There's a lot we need to talk about. We've already been apprised of the latest developments with the Bajoran government. It now looks as if we'll be dealing with the severity front on a much more formal basis than we had anticipated would be the case. She nodded. You're right about that, Commander. I'll be preparing a full report on the coup d'etat. That won't be necessary, Major. I've instructed Odo to put me in touch with his primary intelligence sources on Bajor. As of now, and until further notice, you're relieved of your liaison duties. Kira stared at him in disbelief. Are you joking? There's no one aboard DS9 with the kind of expertise I have in Bajoran political affairs. That may well be, Major, but there aren't other personnel with the same suspicions attached to them either. Kira couldn't believe what she was hearing. With all due respect, Commander, what the hell is that supposed to mean? Are you making an accusation against me? Not at the moment. It may well be that you are responsible for nothing more than some severe lapses in judgment. That's why I'm giving you a break. I'm handling this informally for the time being. That's all we have to discuss right now, Major. You're dismissed. In the remote corridor of DS9, Dax watched as Bashir restored power to the altered holosuite. Bashir opened a small access slot on the control panel. What I'm doing, Dax, is wiring in the programming that we were able to download out of the other holosuites that Armand Wiles used. He started out with one of the standard programs, a generic urban simulation, but it seems to have been extensively modified by the influence of the CI modules. Julian, wouldn't it have been easier and safer to run a model simulation through the computer? Bashir shook his head. There's some kind of interlock routine that's been interlaced with the program. The only way to get into it is by activating it with one of the CI modules. He made a few final adjustments and glanced round at her. Here goes then. The holosuite's door slid open. They stepped through and into darkness. In the perceived distance around Dax, a sulfur-tinged night fog clung to damp, crudely surfaced streets. The mists threaded between looming buildings of dirt-stained brick. Empty windows gaped down upon them. The blue radiance from the overhead streetlights barely penetrated the gloom. Bashir studied the claustrophobic vista. Well, this is cheerful. Sort of an exercise in negative mood induction, don't you think? If by that you mean overtly depressing, I'd have to agree. Dax took a step forward. A sudden wave of dizziness swept across her. She felt Bashir catch her by one arm and around the shoulder. Are you all right, Dax? I don't know. I seem to be experiencing some kind of processing lag. Beneath her feet, she perceived bare metal rather than the rough surface of hallucinated asphalt and stone. Dax held out her hand. The walls faded a bit. Something's off, Julian. The holosuite's effects are erratic. Bashir glanced over his shoulder. It seems to be working all right for me. It must have something to do with the cortical induction module, plus your being a trill. The CI technology works directly on the user's neurosystem. The problem must be that in your case there's two neurosystems operating in tandem, the humanoid one and the symbionts. The two systems are obviously different enough that they're not experiencing the CI module's effects at exactly the same rate. I'll have to take you out of here. Dax shook her head. No, we came in here for a reason. I think there's a way I can take care of this. Under normal conditions, a trill cannot separate the parts of its joint consciousness, but because of the interference effect of the CI module, it appears that the two neurosystems inside me are not functioning at equal strength. It's as if the field created by the CI module is dividing me into two separate creatures again. Dax, that does it. I'm taking you out of here. She grabbed his forearm. Don't you see? We can use this. Instead of fighting the interference effect, I can yield to it. That way, one neurosystem can simply take precedence over the other and operate as a de facto separate entity. Bashir looked doubtful. This sounds somewhat risky. It would only be for while we're here in the holosuite. As soon as we're out again, the two neurosystems would align together once more. Dax closed her eyes again. In this situation, it's probably better if the symbiont withdraws. The humanoid consciousness retains better control of the host body's motor functions. Dax willed herself to let go, and once the withdrawal was complete, she could feel the symbiont's separate mind at the edge of her own consciousness, a touch that was even closer than Bashir's supporting arm. When she opened her eyes, she could see the oppressive night folding around the seemingly solid buildings. The nausea and disorientation had receded. She gently removed Bashir's hand from her arm. I'm all right now, Julian. We should proceed with the investigation. They walked together down the street. They were looking for something human. Commander Sisko had uploaded a hurried memo to them, giving a few details about what he had called echoes in the altered holosuites. If the users of the altered holosuites had left behind electronic echoes of their personalities, they might yield clues to the CI module's operations and their source. At a dead end in the research lab, Dax and Bashir had redirected their efforts. Bashir stopped and looked around. One dismal street had led to another. There's something here, I can feel it. Dax had to agree with him. She pointed down a dark alley branching off the street. Over there. It sounds like breathing. The alley ended blind against a dank wall. Nearby were several battered metal cylinders, a primitive waste removal system. They smelled like rotting food and airborne disease. Bashir laid a hand against the alley wall, then drew it back, looking in revulsion at the wet residue on his fingertips. Well, this couldn't be something from Armand Wyos's own past. From his personnel files, we know that he didn't grow up on any planet as undeveloped as this. Dax agreed, but speculated, if what Commander Sisko told us is correct, there should be some version of Wyos himself still here, his echo. Dax's eyes had adjusted to the alley's darkness. She looked down and saw a grime-clouded casement window at the level of the pavement. Look, Julian, this must be it. A primitive light-emitting device dangled from a bare wire, illuminating a basement room. Cardboard boxes lined the walls. An assortment of worn-out brooms and mops filled one corner of the space, and in the center, beneath the light's yellow glare, was a single cot of tattered canvas. A boy was lying on it, his face buried in his arms. Bashir nodded toward the child, visible through the smeared window. That must be Wyos. Then Bashir pointed to a shadow that appeared on the wooden steps leading from the floor above. The boy lifted his tear-wet face from the cot, looked up at the figure that had entered the cellar, and cringed. The figure held something in his hands, an object laced with leather straps tapering to a flexible curve, the point studded with a bright spark of metal. As Dax watched, the man raised the whip-like instrument. The boy rolled away from its approach, guarding his face between his bare forearms and trembling fists. She saw then that the boy's shirt was not ragged but torn, and she could see that he was bleeding. As she turned away, Bashir reminded her, "It's not real, Dax. You have to remember that it's all an illusion." She didn't care. It was bad enough that she could still hear the high, singing note of the lash as it cut through the air, the sharp impact upon the skin, the gasping sound that was half a cry, half the fearful stifling of that cry. With her eyes closed, Dax could see the adult figure more clearly, dissecting the glimpse she'd had of him. He wore an exact simulation of Benjamin Sisko's uniform as a Starfleet commander. At last, mercifully, there was silence. She looked at the casement window and saw that the cellar was empty now, though something had been left behind. On the cot, like a sleeping snake, lay the instrument the figure had carried in his hands. "Let's go, Julian. I think we've seen enough." "Wait a minute, Dax." Bashir searched the ground, finally prying up a loose stone from the wet pavement. He broke out the window and slid through to the cellar. When he climbed back out, he had the lash coiled in one hand. "I think we have a piece of interesting evidence here." When they reached the lab, Bashir laid the instrument out on one of the benches. It had persisted after its removal from the holosuite, indicating that it was a replicated object. Dax looked at it with a residue of distaste. "What did you bring that out for?" Bashir traced the object's length with a fingertip before turning toward her. "You noticed, didn't you, how the altered holosuite was a jumble of stimuli from several different sources?" "I saw that there was some apparition seemingly dressed as Commander Sisko, if that's what you mean." Bashir nodded. "That certainly explains the murderous fixation Wyos had formed upon the commander. Poor Wyos had been trying to break out of that toxic world in the only way he could figure out. Obviously, the CI module has its own internal programming that it uses to warp the user's perceptions along certain specific patterns. But it has to fill in to make everything work out. Something is always left behind." He picked up the object from the bench. "Take this, for instance. Technically, it's known as a limited trauma induction device. It's very useful for achieving the most pain with the least life-threatening damage to the individual." Dax studied the object. "How do you know about all this?" "Well, during my internship, I pulled a brief tour of duty in a rehab clinic for Starfleet personnel who had been prisoners of war. This thing is only used by the Cardassians. Now we know where the CI modules came from." One of the lab benches was converted to a conference table by the simple expedient of moving several tall stools over to it. The researchers into the station's epidemic of murder listened to Jadzia Dax's description of their expedition in the altered holosuite's hallucinatory world. Odo brushed his finger against the whip-like device on the bench, then turned toward Sisko.
Their analysis of this object's origin is undoubtedly correct, Commander. When this station was under Cardassian control, I was provided with just such a device for use on possibly recalcitrant prisoners. I destroyed it and told Gul Dukat, the Cardassian then in charge, that I had my own methods for maintaining order.
Sisko studied the weapon.
If nothing else, bringing the CI modules on board the station would be consistent with the Cardassians' previous attempts to regain control over the wormhole to the Gamma Quadrant. But how were the modules brought aboard?
Odo shrugged.
I'm afraid that we may be encountering some deficiencies in our perimeter maintenance. There are large sectors of both the station's interior and exterior that we've simply sealed off as having been sabotaged so extensively by the departing Cardassians to be of any practical use. It's not inconceivable that the vandalism on the part of the Cardassians was not the relatively simple destruction that we had initially thought it to be, but actually a cover for various entry and exit points, trapdoors, if you will, that could remain undetected until such time as the Cardassians would need them.
Sisko nodded.
There's one other element which points to our old friends. A Cardassian vessel commanded by Gul Dukat himself has re-entered our navigational sector. I find it difficult to believe that the Gul just happened to be in the neighborhood when the Severalty Front's coup d'etat took place.
A look of doubt crossed Dax's face.
What you're suggesting, Benjamin, is collusion between the new Bajoran government and their bitterest enemies. What could possibly induce them to join in a conspiracy with the only force in the galaxy they despise more than the Federation? I don't know, Dax, but I have a feeling we're going to find out. As I was heading down here on the turbolift, I was notified by Ops that a Bajoran vessel is due to arrive at the station within the hour. It's an official visit, our first from the new government. Apparently, General Auer himself and the new Bajoran Minister of Trade wish to speak to me. I don't expect it to be a cordial visit.
When Sisko arrived on Ops, one of his younger staff walked him toward the door of his office.
They're already waiting for you, sir.
As his office door slid shut behind him, Sisko saw two figures in the office. General Auer, hands clasped behind his back, turned toward Sisko. He recognized the leader of the Severalty Front, and now the new Bajoran government, from the briefing files he had previously scanned. The rigors of the struggle against the Cardassian occupation had bowed the man's back and silvered the sparse hair on his skull. The lined face broke into a smile.
I've looked forward to making your acquaintance, Commander Sisko. We have a lot to talk about.
Sisko managed to return the smile.
Well, General, at least we're starting with something we agree on. There is a lot to talk about.
Auer gestured toward the chair before the desk.
The new government of Bajor has sent someone else who will be critical to our discussions. This is our new Minister of Trade.
The chair swiveled to show the black-clad figure in it. The man stood and grasped Sisko's hand in a firm handshake. McCogue smiled.
Actually, we've already met, haven't we, Commander?
For a moment, Sisko felt dizzy. Then his balance returned, though he had to concentrate to maintain it. He saw McCogue's face before him with the same mocking half-smile that he had last seen in the holosuite's illusory world. He heard General Auer's voice coming from somewhere beside him.
Are you all right? Perhaps we should call for one of your crew to help you.
Sisko waved off Auer's assisting hand.
No, I'm fine. I just need to sit down, that's all.
McCogue leaned back in the chair and watched him.
It's just a simple matter of perceptual misalignment, a slippage of the reality field you carry around inside your head. It's one of those things that in my line of work, I've learned to be careful about.
The general took the other chair in front of the desk.
I trust, Commander, you'll give our Minister of Trade your full cooperation. Mr. Hogue brings some unique qualifications to the position that we felt made him the perfect choice. In the future, I expect all your dealings with our government will be through him.
Sisko turned toward McHogue.
So what exactly are we going to talk about?
McHogue's smile vanished.
I've made a better offer to the Bajoran government. The opportunity for Bajor to become something besides a glorified rest stop and maintenance center for the Federation. This talk of developing Bajor is a giant scam, and you know it. The Federation gets control of the wormhole, and with it the access to the Gamma Quadrant, and the Bajorans get to wait on tables.
Sisko shook his head.
General Auer, if this is the line, the sales pitch, all I can say is that he's completely misrepresented the intent of the Federation here.
McHogue's dark eyes fastened onto Sisko.
Is that so? Then maybe you can explain a few things about your ongoing research activities here. Isn't it true, Commander, that you've already established that the stable wormhole that's been discovered here is not a naturally occurring phenomenon, but an artificially created one?
Sisko couldn't detect what McHogue was driving at. He nodded slowly.
That appears to be the case. We've assumed that the intelligent creatures we've encountered inside the wormhole did, in fact, create it. And isn't it also true that a large proportion of the Federation's research efforts scheduled to take place here at DS9 will be devoted to finding out just how the stable wormhole was created? But, of course.
McHogue sat back with a smug expression.
You say, of course, so easily, Commander. The wormhole is Bajor's one remaining possession of value, and the Federation would like nothing more than to find out how to make 1 billion more wormholes. The Federation's scientists could discover tomorrow the secret to creating a stable wormhole, and the value of Bajor's asset would be reduced to approximately 0.
In frustration, Sisko struck the desktop with his fist.
You have to understand. The result of finding out the wormhole's secrets would be enormous. The benefits for every world in the Federation would be almost incalculable.
McHogue smiled.
Ah, but Bajor isn't part of the Federation, is it?
General Auer broke into the discussion.
Nor will it ever be. I've seen no evidence that the Federation has our interests at heart any more than did the Cardassians. It's far better, from our point of view at least, to keep Bajor's riches for the sake of the Bajorans. But, General, there's things of value that you would get from membership in the Federation. The technology alone. Commander, if there's anything we want from the Federation, then we'll buy it from you, because we'll be able to do that. And just what do you think you'll sell for Bajor to have that kind of money? There's a built-in limit to how much you can charge for access to the wormhole and passage to and from the Gamma Quadrant. Most of that traffic will be speculative in nature. It won't pay off for a long time. By turning your back on the Federation's assistance, you'd be condemning the people of Bajor to decades, perhaps centuries of continuing poverty.
McHogue smiled again, more radiantly than before.
Fortunately for all concerned, there aren't going to be any hardships. You want to talk cash flow? Fine, because I've got news for you. The planet of Bajor isn't going to be flat broke anymore. Bajor has something even more valuable than the wormhole to sell. And what might that be, McHogue? License, Commander. Pure, unadulterated license. The permission to do whatever one wants, and a place to do it in, as long as the bill can be paid.
Sisko gave a deep sigh.
This is what you've sold the new Bajoran government on?
He turned to Auer.
I'm surprised, General, but also a little disappointed. This is one of the oldest money-for-nothing schemes in the galaxy. Mega casinos, pleasure emporia, worlds given over to satisfying every possible vice and indulgence. They all sound like a good idea at the beginning, but then they inevitably collapse, and the operators are left with nothing but a planet full of broken Dabo tables and empty brothels.
McCogue made a show of wincing.
Careful, Commander. Remember, you're talking to a minister of the Bajoran government. The Bajorans are not quite the fools that you and all the rest of the Federation take them to be. I gave them hard facts and figures about just what kind of money they can expect to generate.
Sisko held Auer's gaze.
Did he also tell you what the Federation's reaction to your business enterprise was most likely to be? There's quite a bit that we can do to minimize the negative effects of such an enterprise as you're contemplating. The Federation can place an embargo on such a rogue world, effectively sealing it off from commerce with all other Federation members.
A sneer formed on McCogue's face.
Ah, yes, the embargo tactic. But things are different here. Bajor has the wormhole. The Federation can't cut Bajor off, no matter how offensive or negative it might find our economic activities to be. And there are plenty of other political forces in the galaxy who are less prudish and more pragmatic than that. And they'd be happy to fill the vacuum created by the Federation's withdrawal. The Cardassians are still kicking themselves for giving up Bajor just before the wormhole was discovered.
Sisko took a step toward General Auer.
And is that how you see it? After spending your whole life fighting against the Cardassians, you'd be willing to let them back into Bajoran affairs?
Auer's hardened gaze shot back at Sisko.
If it was on our terms, then yes. We're a broken, starving people, Commander. We have little left to us besides our hunger. I'm just trying to create a situation where we call the shots and not Gul Dukat, or you and the Federation. Read your history books, Commander. Or just look around at your fellow Starfleet officers. You'll see that yesterday's enemy is often today's friend. Why shouldn't Bajorans be as wise and flexible as you are? Let's just say the Severity Front has been in touch with Gul Dukat for some time now, long before we were ready to take over the government. It might almost be fair to say that we've become business partners now.
A degree of McCogue's smugness was now part of General Auer's expression.
Gentlemen, I think we've talked long enough. I should be getting back to Bajor. There are other arrangements that need to be taken care of.
McCogue nodded.
I'll join you in the ship in a few minutes. I want a little time alone with the Commander.
When the door had slid shut again, and Sisko and McCogue were alone in the office, McCogue gazed up at the ceiling before speaking.
You know, the General is exactly the kind of business partner I like to have. He believes everything should be out in the open.
Sisko studied McCogue.
It's obvious to me that your preferred business partner is one that you've managed to keep in the dark about your actual intentions. I can't imagine that someone such as Auer would go along with your plans if he was aware of the true nature of the CI modules and what they can do.
McCogue shrugged.
Perhaps. But why should he trust anything a Starfleet officer would tell him? Commander, people from all over the galaxy are going to flock to Bajor, not just to experience CI-generated hallucinations, but to actually live them, in this reality. The holosuite on Bajor will be the ultimate advertisement for what we're actually going to be selling. Experiences that our customers will be able to get nowhere else.
Sisko regarded McCogue contemptuously.
You're certainly open about revealing your intentions. To me, at least. Perhaps. But then again, the beauty of this setup is that there isn't anything you or all the rest of Starfleet and the Federation can do about it. Look on the bright side, Commander. You can start packing your bags now. After a debacle such as losing the Federation's control over Bajor and the wormhole, the only possible outcome would be for you to be transferred to a safe desk job back on Earth. And maybe that's what you really want.
The door slid open, and McCogue was gone, leaving Sisko in the office's enfolding silence. Late that evening, Jake woke, not even knowing what time it was. The datapad on which he had been entering his homework assignment dropped onto the bedroom floor as he sat up. Listening, he could tell that someone else was in the living quarters. He looked around the room's door and down the short corridor. He could see his father sitting on one of the couches in the main area, gazing ahead of himself as though deep in thought. Barefoot, Jake walked out to the main area and sat down on the edge of the couch. His father looked tired, eyes closed.
Dad, maybe you should go to bed. It's late. Is it, Jake? I suppose you're right. But, Jake, have you ever thought what it would be like to go home?
Jake was puzzled.
What do you mean? We are home.
His father smiled sadly and shook his head.
No, I meant your real home. I meant going back to Earth. Would you like that?
Jake shrugged.
Well, if that's what you wanted. But I'd miss being here. You'd miss the station? Well, sure. You know how we'd always go into one of the holosuites together, and there'd be all that grass and trees and stuff and blue sky? I always went in there with you because that's your home. Earth and everything. The station is my home.
Sisko was silent for a long time. Then he nodded.
It's my home too, son. Now it is.
He stood up.
Come on, son. We'd better get all the rest we can. Might be our last chance for a while.
With Major Kira Nerys relieved of her duties, Sisko ordered Odo to investigate McHogue's activities on Bajor. Sisko ordered the remaining CI module removed from the holosuite, and Dax and Bashir continued their research in the lab. After 2 days, Sisko convened a meeting in his office.
As you all know, our attention is no longer divided. The political crisis on Bajor has dovetailed with our investigation into the murder epidemic here aboard the station. The same individuals are responsible for both. Now all we have to do is find a single solution rather than two different ones. Odo, you have a report on events on Bajor?
Sisko turned toward his security chief. Odo glanced at the notes on his datapad, controlling unaccustomed emotions. It still rankled him that his beloved Deep Space Nine, his home, his world, had been violated by a creature as loathsome as McHogue. He could well believe that this was what a family man such as the commander felt upon hearing that his son had been exposed to this person's machinations. It was hard to remain quite rational about the subject, yet when he spoke, his voice was even.
McHogue's plans for Bajor seem to be already in motion. An entire new city is being built on the planet just for McHogue's operations. It was to be called McHogue City, but the name has already been shortened to Mogity. Your analysis, Constable? The kind of resources necessary would indicate a greater degree of Cardassian involvement than we had previously assumed. The main traffic entrance will be attached directly to the landing area. The immense buildings will not have windows or any other means of connecting to the outside world. They will be sealed environments that are to be built in a matter of days.
Sisko turned toward Dax.
Do you have any more data from your work on the CI modules?
Everything we've discovered so far, Benjamin, just confirms our initial theories about the cortical induction technology. Essentially, all the sequences have an extremely low addiction threshold, followed by a steeply ramped burn-through cycle. Once McHogue's customers are introduced to the CI technology's effects, a high percentage of them would wind up the same way Armand Wyos did. Sisko frowned and set his fist upon the desk.
It doesn't make sense. A successful business enterprise doesn't kill off its customers. There must be something else that McHogue is trying to achieve.
Quark placed a mug of synthale on the table in front of Kira.
You seem to be in a wretched mood, Major. You're usually so bright and cheery.
Kira took a sip of the drink he'd brought her.
Sorry to bring the festive mood down, but I've got a lot on my mind.
It was Quark's turn to look dejected.
No, that's all right. I'm grateful for any business at all. McHogue and that fancy schmancy pleasure city that he's got the Cardassians putting up for him are taking the bread out of my mouth. Maybe I should just climb aboard one of their shuttles and go down there myself. McCogue can put me in one of his holosuites and take me back to the days when I was young and rapacious.
They're running shuttles down to this place? I'm amazed Commander Sisko would give them permission to arrange travel right from the station.
He didn't. McCogue set up a docking substation within transporter range. They'll beam aboard anyone who asks, and then send them on down to Bajor.
She mulled over the Ferengi's information. Since she had been taken off duty by Sisko, there had been no way that she could requisition one of the station's runabouts. But if McCogue was going to be this obliging... She picked up the data pad from the table and pushed back her own chair.
Don't worry about business, Quark. I'm sure you've still got what it takes.
When Kira arrived at Mogadi, an official was there to greet her.
So, I take it that you're my escort? I'm flattered that you think I deserve the special treatment. Oh, we're aware of your having been taken off full duty. Your Commander Sisko seems a bit given to groundless suspicions. How did you know I was going to pay you a visit? Major Kira, please. If you hadn't, then we would have had to invite you. This way, please.
From the corridor, they stepped out onto a curved balustrade. At the guardrail, Kira could look down upon a milling crowd of the galaxy's sentient species. They gave off en masse an aura of mingled excitement and greed that repelled her.
This is just the annex off the transportation area.
The man pointed out features of the immense complex, leaning close to Kira. His voice seemed to speak right in her ear, so soothing that her eyelids became heavy and closed.
I can tell you why you're here. You have this vision of yourself, don't you, Major? The avenging angel, the fiery sword, the one-woman hit squad. You want to find some switch to throw that would overload the power generators and blow all of Mogadi to atoms. Or perhaps something less flamboyant, but just as satisfying. You could, with your bare hands, tear out my throat.
Her eyes flew open. She saw before her not the official, but the image of McCogue turned to flesh.
You shouldn't act so surprised, Major. You've entered my territory. You should be flattered that I'm giving you such special treatment. Come on. There's some other things I'd like you to see.
Away from the murmur of the gaming floor, a balcony opened to a view of the hills surrounding the new city. The landscape had been scraped bare by the towering construction equipment arrayed along the horizon. Kira shook her head. Your friends, the Cardassians, certainly have a taste for epic architecture. McCogue leaned his hands against the balcony's rail.
Gul Dukat has been very useful and discreet, but it's not that simple. I'm not done giving you the tour yet.
Another corridor, high-ceilinged with soft, dreamy light, the color of a perfect dawn. A row of holosuites extended down one wall.
Look familiar, Major?
Kira shrugged.
Holosuites? Do you really think intelligent creatures are going to fall for this? Once people find out that there's nothing but death and madness at the end, you'll be walking around your precious Mogadi by yourself.
You speak from ignorance, Major.
He pressed the control at the side of one of the holosuites. The door slid open. Inside, a figure knelt at the center of the chamber. A face radiant with belief looked up at her, and she recognized an acolyte from the capital's temple. The acolyte she'd seen on her last visit. The acolyte's gaze pierced Kira and focused on a vision far beyond.
I saw her. The Kai.
Kira knew that McCogue stood somewhere behind them, stood at the door, watching and smiling. Back on DS9 in her living quarters, Kira lay on her bed and gazed up at the ceiling. She thought about the events of her brief journey to McHogue's world. It infuriated her to think of the temple's acolyte lost in thrall to such a mind and its creations. If lies were so mighty, at what point did they become omnipotent? When would the great liar McHogue declare himself to be the truth? As she had left Bajor, she had looked back through one of the craft's viewports and seen furious clouds swirling in Bajor's upper atmosphere, as though a season of hurricanes had begun to prematurely gather its force. That was what the world behind her brow felt like now, as though it were a mirror of Bajor itself. Suddenly, she felt tired beyond belief, and she fell into a deep, troubled sleep. In Ops, Sisko leaned over the shoulder of the ensign sitting at the meteorological console. "How does it look down there?" "Not good, sir. This is the worst global weather pattern anyone's ever seen on Bajor. There's a parade of hurricanes across the major oceans that's virtually unbroken. And worse, when they move on shore, they don't seem to be dissipating. They just pile on top of each other. Upper atmosphere's a mess as well." Sisko turned to one of the other crew members. "Do we still have communications with Bajor?" "Negative, Commander. All subspace comm links with the planet have been interrupted due to the field disturbance. We've been able to pick up some garbled transmissions. There's bound to be pretty extensive reports of physical damage and casualties afterwards. If there is an afterwards, sir." "How about from the new city?" Sisko couldn't bring himself to say the name Mogadi. The crew member shook his head. "Negative, sir. Indications are that all structures have been completely sealed off. Like everyone else down there, they seem to be riding it out as best they can." "Very well. Keep monitoring the situation. Let me know if anything changes." Another day passed before that change occurred. "Commander, another garbled transmission from Bajor." "Clean it up and put it on my console, Ensign." The transmission was from Mogadi. After Sisko saw it, he somberly directed the ops technician to reroute it so Dax and Bashir could see it. In the research lab, Dax and Bashir were appalled at what they saw. The blood-drenched interior of Mogadi's main casino area. They had caught the barest glimpse of this madness in Armand Wyas's drugged mutterings. Now it had seemingly found a new and more powerful incarnation. Dax looked at Bashir. "We knew this was coming, didn't we?" What they had viewed together on the computer panel's screen had showed a red torrent that washed battered corpses against the gaming tables and other abandoned instruments of pleasure. A war zone contained within the domed spaces of the city. Bashir pointed to the blank screen where the images had been. "There may still be someone alive there." Dax shook her head. "It's possible, Julian, but the person responsible for this transmission may be as dead as the others that we saw." "True, but as a doctor, I have to base my actions on the possibility, no matter how remote, that some fraction of the city's population will be found still alive. I need to have our facilities ready for an undetermined number of casualties, anywhere from 1 to hundreds of them." He began gathering together his datapad and the working notes that had accumulated over the last several shifts. "Am I to assume that your assistance in this research will no longer be available?" "I'm sorry, Dax, but at this point I believe we've already found out all we need to know. We could go on forever tearing apart that one CI module. What good would it do?" Dax touched his arm. "I understand, Julian. I really believed when we started this investigation that we would find some way of preventing this from happening." He shook his head. "It's too late for that now." The lab door slid open, and Dax watched him carry his things out into the corridor. Then she turned back to examine the innards of the CI module. She had made no more than a token protest when he had wanted to leave, because there were decisions to be made, actions to be taken, that would be easier without him. Outside the boundaries of the station, entwined into the fabric of the universe, the pattern of data from the remote sensors was growing clearer. The connection between what was happening on the surface of Bajor and the web of seemingly random anomalies that had slowly formed both through and beneath space itself was real now, if still invisible. Before coming to the lab, she had studied the latest reports at the Ops Meteorological Observations Desk. All the other crew members had been focused on the storms battering the surface of Bajor. Only she had noted the other numbers, the ionic discharge factors surrounding the upper atmosphere, the indices of positron emissions rippling through the fabric of space itself. The numbers were just a few degrees off normal readings, but she could see the direction in which they were heading. An exponential acceleration. Soon enough, Deep Space Nine would feel the first shock waves. McHogue's private universe would have attained its own critical mass. There might be no way to stop the implosive subsuming of the outer reality into the voracious black hole he was creating. She began by recording a message addressed to the only other person on board DS9 who would understand, not just what she was going to do, but why. That message was the last thing she needed to take care of. Now, sparks of light glowed along the circuits as she switched on the power supply that she and Bashir had rigged up for the CI module. Computer, initiate simulation sequence. Dax knew that inside the CI module, a little world had been created and was waiting. Computer, increase power to operational level and set radiated field at 1 meter from center axis of subject module. She closed her eyes as the CI module's reality expanded from a mathematical point of nothingness to a circumference that held her within it. After 3 seconds, she opened her eyes and found a world of darkness, the blind windows and ashen walls of Armand Wyos's hallucinated world, the bleak urban landscape that had been his personal hell. Dax took a single step backward and stepped out of the limited range of the module's effects. Computer, append research notes. The cortical induction field appears to have increased effective strength since my previous experience with it. I attribute the additional CI strength to the ongoing after effects of repeated exposure to the module's operations. End notes, computer. Dax continued to regard the activated CI module, mulling over her previous finding, the thing that she hadn't told Bashir. That the CI technology represented a two-way passage she and Julian had already determined, but just within the last shift, she had tracked down another equally important element. All of the CI modules were connected on a subspace communications link. From a central locus on Bajor's surface, a network united the CI modules in all the holosuites in Mogati. The altered holosuites were not creating a multiplicity of perceptual worlds based upon the input of their various users, but instead were drawing those users into facets of a single master-programmed alternate reality. That all-encompassing hallucination resulted in a single world shared among them, the world that McHogue had created for them. Dax held out her hand, fingers just touching the invisible field of the CI module's radiation, McHogue's own universe. But Dax knew McHogue had forgotten one thing: a back door to that world, that private universe, a door left open aboard the station. All she would have to do would be to take a single step forward, and she would be there, walking inside McHogue's head. He had forgotten about this CI module aboard DS9, operable and connected to all the others by the subspace link they shared. Dax stepped forward into the range of the CI module's field. The research lab disappeared from around her. She gazed around at the empty, darkness-shrouded shapes that filled the world into which she had entered, McHogue's world. Then she began walking toward the bright doorway of the horizon. As Dr. Bashir entered Ops, A silent shuddering rolled through the station's frame, strong enough to jar him back against the open doorway. Commander Sisko, leaning over the central control panel, turned quickly toward him.
Where's Dax? We're going to need her up here immediately. We've got some spatial field disturbances coming our way, major ones. Their point of emanation seems to be Bajor.
Odo came up beside him.
Commander, we've not been able to get a response from Dax.
Sisko looked toward Bashir.
That first jolt may have caused some damage inside the lab. You'd better get down there, Constable. You too, Doctor. She might be injured.
A short time later, when Odo and Bashir reached the lab, they found it empty. Or, apparently so. Bashir thought he could sense Dax's presence. He and Odo stood next to the workbench, looking around the area.
She should be here. Where else could she be?
Odo suddenly grabbed Bashir's arm and pulled him away from the bench.
Watch out, Doctor.
Then Bashir saw it. The disassembled CI module had been powered up. At the same time, he caught the scent of charred wiring insulation and burnt-out components. Even as he looked at the module's exposed innards, another piece of it failed, bursting into a white-centered flare. Bashir picked up one of the probe tools that had been left scattered on the bench. A cautious insertion of the tool's point unleashed a fury of sparks. Now the module was dead, its circuits reduced to black cobwebs already crumbling to ash. Odo regarded the object's remains with his usual deep distrust.
What happened to it?
Bashir steadied himself against the edge of the bench.
Perhaps our friend McHogue decided that he didn't want people prying into his secrets anymore. But we still need to find Dax.
A quick search through the rest of the lab yielded no sign of her. Odo returned to the bench area and contacted the ops deck.
Commander, we're not having much success down here.
As Odo talked to Sisko, Bashir found the most recent additions to Dax's research notes. He quickly scanned the words into which Dax's voice had been transcribed. Then he contacted Sisko.
Commander, are we presently capable of getting any signals to and from Bajor? We've managed to establish a comm link. It's weak and erratic, but we can get through. Why do you ask? I suggest, Commander, that you redirect the tracer you have out for Dax and her comm badge. There's a good chance you'll find her down there on Bajor, in the city of Mogadi, to be precise.
Bashir shook his head as he looked at the burnt-out remains of the CI module.
McHogue came out here and got her, just like that.
On the screen of his office computer, Sisko found a delayed memorandum from Dax. She had marked it both urgent and confidential. He leaned back in his chair and listened to Dax's voice.
Benjamin, I'm routing this information to you personally, as you can best determine what use should be made of it. To be brief, the situation regarding McHogue and his plans may be much worse than we had previously thought. Even before the present atmospheric storms on Bajor and the ongoing spatial disturbances in our sector, there were indications of a deeper underlying phenomenon taking place. A fundamental cosmological shift is taking place, with the city of Mogadi functioning as its epicenter. Mogadi has become a black hole, but one unlike any we've ever encountered before. It's as if the cosmos that we normally perceive were reduced to a map, spread out and fastened upon a table. Now that table, the subspace dimensions that maintain our universe, is being destroyed. Somehow, the operations of McHogue's CI modules are drawing subspace in upon itself and collapsing it, just as a gravitational black hole does with light radiation. This would be a cataclysm beyond our imaginings, Benjamin, an eclipsing of the galaxies themselves. The consequences of McHogue's operations upon the surface of Bajor have reached a critical point. That's why I'm forwarding this memorandum to you, Benjamin.
Sisko turned his head and saw the words, "End of Memorandum," on the screen before him. He tapped his comm badge.
Commander Sisko to Dr. Bashir. Any sign of Dax?
Negative, sir. Odo and I are heading toward Ops. There's a lot we need to talk about.
Very well, make it quick.
Another series of bone-jarring impacts rattled through the station before Bashir and Odo arrived. The office door slid shut behind them.
All right then. I want to hear exactly what you found.
What everyone who has gone into one of the altered holosuites has discovered, including yourself, Commander, is that McHogue himself is the basic substratum of that illusory world. Every brick, every leaf on a tree is McHogue. There's no getting away from him in there, except for the way Dax had discovered. Once the symbiont's neurosystem had locked onto the CI module's effects and gotten Dax into that hallucinatory world, she planned to separate her humanoid consciousness away from what the symbiont perceived, and thus go behind the hallucination and directly into McHogue's consciousness. Bashir hunched his shoulders as though from an involuntary reaction to his own memory of the altered holosuite. Commander, all she had to do was take a step backward from the lab bench where the module was situated, and she would have been out of reach of the field generated by the CI technology. The symbiont would have been able to assume sufficient motor control over the host body to do that much. But something else happened that Dax hadn't foreseen. Somehow, the powers that McHogue has gained through the CI technology have achieved reality in this universe. Once Dax had stepped into his hallucinatory world, McHogue was able to reach into the station, as though with a transporter beam, and remove Dax's actual physical being to Mogety. We have the tracer signal locked on Dax's comm badge to confirm it. Sisko's hands became fists. Dax was now physically in McHogue's world. How could it have happened? How did McHogue do it? Odo's voice reached into Sisko's brooding thoughts.
What should we do, Commander? We need to make a decision.
Sisko roused himself from his silence.
Gentlemen, I have made my decision. I'm going after her.
Bashir protested.
It's too dangerous to use the holosuite. Look what happened to Dax. Doctor, I have no intention of going after Dax by placing myself under the CI effects again. I'm going down to Bajor myself to find Dax and fetch her back here.
Odo slowly shook his head.
Commander, the impact of the shockwaves has been sufficient to cause extensive structural damage to DS9. A runabout caught in that kind of flux field could be crushed like an egg. Your concerns are well-founded, Constable. That's why I'll be going alone on this mission. As for when I reach Bajor, every hurricane has an eye where the air is relatively still. It's just a matter of threading the needle.
When Jadzia Dax opened her eyes, she saw Armand Wyos's world stretched on all sides of her. This was the world that held a weeping boy in a dark cellar. Jadzia let the connection between herself and the symbiont come to an end. She was alone, and in darkness. The chill breeze she had felt against her skin had disappeared, along with even the faintest light. All sensory processing had been taken over by the symbiont's neurosystem, leaving her cortex, the humanoid part of what had been their shared consciousness, to pass beyond the CI data stream. A spark moved at the center of her vision, swelling and multiplying in fractal-like patterns, consuming darkness, transforming it into raw color, then shade and form. The infinitely small and busy machinery, the creating of another reality, surged to the peripheries of her sight, then were gone. She saw a high-ceilinged white corridor in front of her, and someone waiting. McHogue smiled.
How good of you to drop in, Jadzia. I've been expecting you.
Jadzia felt only two things were alive in this world, herself and McHogue, and she couldn't be sure about him.
Yes, of course, Jadzia. You're absolutely right to have such doubts.
McHogue gestured toward the bare horizon, and what she saw lay a chill hand upon her heart. A world of corpses, bones whitening beneath a glaring sun. The walls of the city of Mogety had been breached. It looked like centuries ago. The withered branches of the trees were skeletal hands clawing at the sky.
They came and wagered away all the money in their pockets. Then they pawned their clothes. Then I let these poor losers pawn the flesh off their bones.
He gestured toward the tangled skeletal remains.
The storms of mortality have passed. Now they've found safe harbor in me. In my world, Jadzia, in my mind. This universe has become real.
At last, Jadzia found her voice.
That's what defines insanity. For you, at least. You've convinced yourself that your fantasy has physical existence.
McCoge's smile turned feral.
Then prove it doesn't, Jadzia. I know all about your escape route. All you have to do is take a single step backward. Then do so. Leave. You might as well. There's nothing you can accomplish here anyway.
A knot of fear seized inside her gut. Instinctively, she stepped back. And in that other place, in the research lab aboard Deep Space Nine, there was no one. McCoge reached out and grabbed her wrist, squeezing it tight.
You see? I told you so. The unreal has become the real.
A shadow fell across them. McCoge's delight was evident as he turned his face toward the sky and saw the runabout descending.
I think it's admirable that your old friend Sisko would come all this way for your sake.
The runabout touched down and came to a halt in what had been Mogaty's grand concourse. The relief Jadzia felt at Sisko's appearance in the runabout's hatch was like a rush of oxygen into her lungs. McCoge made a small bow toward him.
My dear Commander, it's always such a pleasure to see you.
Sisko sprinted to Jadzia's side.
Are you all right?
She nodded.
I'll be fine. Soon as I'm away from here and I'm reconjoined with my symbiont.
Sisko gestured to the runabout.
The CI field has apparently coalesced here. Once we're out of actual physical proximity to its locus, the effects on you should be reversible, just as if you'd been able to step backward from the module aboard the station.
McCoge smiled broadly.
Maybe, maybe not. They calculate poorly, those who don't take me into account.
Jadzia shook her head.
He's insane, Benjamin. There's no difference now between him and this world he's created. We should return to the station immediately. Perhaps there's still some way we can find to limit the damage to the surrounding universe.
McCoge's smile had faded with each of her words.
Now I am annoyed. You want to leave here? All right. I'll make it easy for you.
Jadzia saw the blow coming. McCoge's hand curling into a fist. She tried to pull Benjamin out of its path, but was too late. As close as she had been, she was still unable to discern exactly what had happened. Which had been real and which illusion, the fist or its target. They seemed to pass one into the other. Illusions overlapped and mingled. But only one of them remained. Sisko was gone. McCoge nodded in grim satisfaction.
That's what he wanted. Let's see how he likes it.
Sisko walked in a place where he had walked before.
This is the station. I'm back. Back aboard Deep Space Nine, or not Deep Space Nine.
He came to the promenade. Strewn across the open walkways were blackened shapes that had once been living creatures, the human and non-human population of DS9. Sisko stood at the edge of the grim display, his senses at war with a mind that refused to believe its perceptions. The unleashing of death itself, the face of pure murder. What he and the other officers of the station had termed an epidemic of murder had been transformed into its own incendiary hurricane, an annihilating firestorm. Sisko called aloud, his voice echoing in the high-ceilinged space. "Is there anyone here? Anyone left alive?" A few meters away, the image of McCoge appeared against the bulkhead. Sisko stared at him with disbelief. "It's all false, McCoge. These things here, They're all just you wearing different masks. McHogue shrugged.
Somehow, Commander, I knew you would still doubt me and my accomplishments.
McHogue made a sweeping gesture toward the distant end of the corridor.
Continue, my dear Sisko. You're not done yet.
He was alone again. Empty, lifeless space spread before him as he stepped onto the ops deck. A chair before one of the consoles slowly turned, revealing an image of his own face, and he heard his own voice.
I've been waiting for you for a long time.
Sisko regarded the seeming mirror before him.
Everything here is you, isn't it, McHogue?
The voice of Sisko's echo changed slightly, letting McHogue's voice seep through, as from behind a mask.
Why should I make any distinction between myself and this universe? I've become the universe.
It's just this little shabby world inside your head, that's all.
The echo looked pityingly at him.
You still don't understand, do you? There is no limit. With every tiny scrap of life that I've taken and added to myself, with every one, this universe has grown and become greater. And now, it's time to go from inside my head to the stars.
McHogue's voice seemed to come from some distant point.
It's a shame you won't experience that, Commander. You've reached the limits of my hospitality. I'm afraid that it's time for you to cease existing in this universe or any other.
The last trace of McHogue disappeared from behind the echo. Sisko found himself gazing into his own face again. The image's hand grabbed Sisko's throat. Even as Sisko gasped for air, he could look into his echo's eyes and see what this part of himself had become. The echo's face was an emotionless mask, cold and inhuman. No love, no concern. There was only the will to command and control, to bend reality to one's inexorable will. The image spoke. That's right. Now you know the truth at last. That I am what was always inside you. When you searched for murderers, you looked everywhere but in your own heart. Sisko closed his eyes, looking for something in that darkness, something that he found. A door that slid open, spilling bright, false sunlight against his face. He stepped into the sunlight. The door closed behind him, and he was once more in that small, limitless world that McHogue had created. For his son, Jake. Water rippled against the glistening rocks. Sisko shaded his eyes against the sun, the better to see the boy kneeling on a rocky perch in the middle of the stream. I came here to see you, to tell you that it's time for you to go home. The boy gazed at him in mocking disbelief. You're crazy. This is my home. Get out of here. I killed you once before already. I can do it again. No, you can't. Because it's not your home now. That was the truth that Sisko had come so far to discover. The world that McHogue had created, this little part of it, had come to exist inside his own mind. And that was enough to make it his own, to reclaim it. Sisko bent down and touched the water's surface. The boy stretched out a hand toward him. Stop! Don't! There was no water now. The bed of the stream was dry ground, cracked where the mud had begun to crumble into dust. Sisko straightened up, turning to see the other changes that he had willed to happen. Brown leaves scattered from withered branches, clouds incapable of rain, fields turned black as though scorched by an unseen fire. The boy was silent now, huddled into a ball on the rounded stone. Sisko closed his eyes again. There had been no need to step back through a door from the false bright world to this one. He had always been here, and in that time, from one heartbeat to the next, breath rushed back into his lungs. His echo gazed at him with the same uncomprehending wonder with which the dying boy had, and in the same death. Another transformation, the final one, had taken place. Sisko opened his hand, releasing the throat of his echo. The echo's face in sudden confusion, its eyes flooded with tears. I don't understand. How? Sisko knelt beside his echo. McCogue lied to you. The echo died, and a jagged fissure ran through the bulkhead like a stroke of empty lightning. He could feel the illusory station tremble and shudder beneath his feet. The ceiling broke apart above him, but the crumbling pieces didn't fall. The last thing he saw was stars rushing in through the razor-like shards of the viewport. Suddenly, Sisko heard Jadzia's voice.
We've got to get out of here, Benjamin.
She half-carried, half-dragged him toward the runabout. Overhead, the sky had darkened with the return of the storm clouds. The runabout's door slid open, and she managed to get Sisko into one of the seats. The sudden acceleration was enough to pin her against the seat's back. Only when the runabout had broken beyond the planet's atmosphere did she throttle back on the engine's force. Then she felt something inside her, filling a hollowness as wide as her heart, the symbiont's thoughts becoming her own again. Beside her, Sisko stirred, his eyes opening for a moment.
Where are we? Where are we going?
Dax glanced over at him.
Home, Benjamin. We're going home.
Sisko whispered to her.
He forgot, Dax. McCogue forgot that the world he'd created was inside our heads as well. In our thoughts and dreams. Because he'd put it there. That was where it was real. Or as real as it could ever be. And what McCogue had made real inside our heads, then we could make it unreal again. If we just knew how.
McCogue thought it a most peculiar thing. Where was everybody? There had been so many of them here, and now they were all gone. McCogue looked around, wondered what had happened. Very peculiar. There was no other place they could all be. This was the only world there was. There could be no other. He had seen to that. He called out, his voice echoing down the empty concourse, but there was no answer. So he would have to go find them. They had to be around, somewhere. McCogue started walking. The empty corridor stretched before him, seemingly infinite. He realized he had no idea how big it actually was. He kept walking. He'd already decided that he would go on walking, for however long it might take. In the commander's office, Odo reviewed the statement that had been received from the Cardassian ruling council. He pointed to the words on the commander's computer panel.
Gul Dukat's formal apology. The line they've taken is that it was a rogue group of their scientists who had developed the new cortical induction technology and supplied it to McCogue. Naturally, everyone involved will be severely punished.
He watched as the commander nodded and blanked the panel. There had been other accounts of measures taken and fates decided. The most satisfying had been the word received from Bajor of the collapse of the Severalty Front and the re-establishment of the previous provisional government. And with Major Nerys returned to active duty, Odo could concentrate on his duties aboard Deep Space Nine.
I should be returning to the security office, Commander. Yes, of course, Constable. I didn't mean to detain you.
The door slid shut after Odo, and Sisko went to his living quarters to lie down. When he opened the door, he saw Jake idly tossing a baseball and catching it. His son looked up at him.
You look kind of tired, Dad.
Sisko managed to smile.
A little more than usual, I suppose. But tell you what, After I get some rest, I could use a little baseball practice.
Jake regarded him with a mixture of hope and skepticism.
You sure? I mean, you've been busy a lot.
Sisko sat and closed his eyes, rolling his head back against the sofa cushion.
Only busy with things that don't even exist, Jake. And they can wait.
Jake watched his father for a moment longer, then slid off his fielder's glove and set it down on the sofa cushion between them. He stood up, glancing back over his shoulder as he headed to his room, leaving his father to his long-delayed rest.
Star Trek Deep Space Nine, Warped, was written by K.W. Jeter and read by Rene Auberjonois. It was adapted for audio by George Truitt, with script editing by Jan Werner. Post-production supervisor was Linda Wallman. The recording engineer was Sam Aronson. Tape editors were Dave Levan and Pete Pentelis of Norwood Production, with sound design by Gary Fink. Original music was composed by Sam McCallie, Carl Schurtz, Yves Beglarian, and Richard Emmett. The associate producer was Florence Barreau Adams. Star Trek Deep Space Nine, Warped, was directed by Jill Demby Guest. This has been a presentation of Simon & Schuster Audio.